Chapter 1, The Island. During the 2016 American political campaign, I spent 3 months in Honolulu's Queens Medical Center, a healing place I have come to know very well. As the weeks passed, I tempered the upsetting political news by transporting myself to the time and place of my childhood, a tiny island, not even a dot on most maps. Except for brief visits, I had not returned to Atoll for nearly 40 years, having departed on a Chuuk State field ship in August 1979 for the main island of Ueno. Villagers gathered at the lagoon side to bid us farewell as my mates and I departed to begin high school. I was 15 years old, hiding my anxieties beneath a smile, already feeling the pangs of homesickness as my island disappeared over the horizon. Page 15. Our atoll was called Nomosepi. It included a lagoon bordered by a ring of coral islets, marking the fringe of an ancient volcano that once breathed a ring of fire. The lagoon, seemingly bottomless and blue, was miles across. In sunshine, it sparkled like an emerald. Under stars, it glistened as cold and fathomless as a shark's unblinking eye. The largest of the islets was Atoll. It was perhaps a half-mile in length and several hundred yards across at its widest. The island was marked by the lagoon on one side and the ocean, fathomless, on the other. Dryland taro was cultivated on the southern end with an ancient, time-worn path interconnecting thatch houses, a tin-roofed school, 2 churches, Protestant and Catholic, a medical dispensary, and a small store along its way. Without bicycles, mopeds, or cars, the islanders walked, mostly barefooted. On the lagoon side, canoes dotted the crushed coral shoreline, hand-carved with axe and adze, resulting from techniques originating from time immemorial. Fishing canoes accommodating 1, 2, or 3 paddlers were appropriate for handline fishing and diving. Sheltered in canoe houses were the outrigger sailing canoes, which were capable of journeying to the far corners of the ocean. The sailing canoes were expensive to purchase, costing land rights, taro fields, and breadfruit trees. During my childhood, there was only one motorboat on Atoll. Nowadays, the sailing canoes have largely disappeared, replaced by wood plank boats powered by gasoline. Page 18. The ocean side of the atoll was a world apart. Seabirds skittering across white sand, soaring above the foaming surf, infusing the air with salt spray. Atoll sat adrift in a symphony of ebb and flow, lapping, splashing, pounding waves, enchanted by the cries of frigate birds. Near the far end of the island, in a clearing out of sight of any neighbors, sat my grandparents' house. It was constructed entirely of thatch, with a floor covered in pandanus mats, woven by my grandmother. The house was airy and cool, unlike the tin roof cement structures so common today. I called my grandparents Mama and Papa. My mother already had 2 daughters, so when grandmother asked if she and grandfather might raise me, my mother didn't complain. My grandparents had the authority of tradition, including the right to request a firstborn grandson to raise as their own. My mother was to give birth to 4 more sons, so I wasn't greatly missed. I was sickly as a baby, spending a lot of time at the island's dispensary under the attentive care of one Jojo, the dispensary corpsman. In appreciation, my parents called me by his name, inviting him to become my godfather. We also had island healers who practiced traditional medicine. They were skilled in the arts of massage and herbal remedy. My mother's sister was recognized as such, massaging me when I suffered my frequent bouts with asthma. My grandparents' plantation included coconut, banana, papaya, and breadfruit trees, the staple foods of the island. Theirs was a homestead with pigs and chickens, taro fields, and of course the breathing ocean and breathless blue lagoon. My grandparents said I was a good helper even when I was young. Because they had no girls, I was expected to help with all kinds of chores: grating coconut to feed the chickens, gathering firewood for the cooking fire, and carrying water buckets from the well. I raked the clearing, gathered fronds to protect and fertilize the taro, and helped grandfather maintain our seawall, repair thatch, salt and dry fish, and much, much more. Papa made rope by twisting and weaving the fibers of coconut husks. We made brooms by stripping the fronds and binding their spines. Grandfather whistled as he worked, and I learned to do the same. Whistling was an island thing. Once when I was bitten by a coconut crab, he rinsed the wound in a tide pool, applied a poultice, wiped away my tears, and assured me it wasn't half as bad as it looked. Bravely, I believed. After all, he was my adored grandfather. Mama was both seamstress and weaver, making sleeping mats and platters from pandanus, piecing and sewing material for the mu'u dresses she wore every day to church. Mama evaporated seawater to make salt and buried breadfruit for preservation. Grandmother was a superb cook, whether it be octopus, eel, lobster, coconut crab, parrotfish, grouper, snapper, or trevally. Butter and lard were absent from her pantry. Seafood soup was the go-to meal of our day. We had few, if any, metal utensils. We ate fish with our fingers, sucking on the bones. My grandparents awoke before sunrise, Papa wanting to work the taro field before the heat of the day, Mama taking me by the hand to the church for morning hymns and prayers, returning home in time to feed the animals and have breakfast before retreating my steps down the path to school. I did not relish going to school. My uncle was the elementary grade teacher, so any absence on my part was noted and reported to my grandparents. Given a choice, I would have stayed home to help my grandfather, and I believe he would have been on my side, but there was no escaping school. My peers and I squirmed on the floor of the sweltering tin-roofed school, counting the hours until the ringing of the 3 o'clock release bell. I raced home to go about my chores without complaining. My grandmother washed our laundry at the well, draping the wet clothing over bushes and branches to dry. The well water was clean enough for washing, but not for drinking. We bathed in the lagoon, scrubbing ourselves with salt water. not depending on store-bought soap, rinsing off with a bucket from the well. Grandmother extracted coconut oil to use as skin moisturizer. We rinsed our teeth in salt water. I don't recall ever suffering cavities. We raised pigs, always a dog or two, and many, many chickens, none of which were safe from my grandmother's knife. The pigs were carefree until such special occasions as church holidays, graduations, funerals, and weddings. I don't know why we raised so many chickens, as we never ate their eggs, consuming them only on special occasions. Grandfather was one of the two chiefs on the island, so his public presence and contributions were expected. The chickens roosted overhead in the breadfruit trees and were supervised by pretentious roosters that preened and crowed day and night. As a teenager, my cousins and I selected the most combative to be our fighting cocks, but the majority were nothing more than a nuisance. We never had much cash money. I can probably count the number of times I held a dollar bill. If we had anything, it would have been just a few pennies or a nickel. I'd walk to the store with coins in hand. "I'd like a cup of rice, please," I'd murmur shyly. Rice cost a nickel a cup, which I'd pay for with pennies. The storekeeper grumbled at my antics. "Hurry up," she'd command as I fumbled with the coins. We never bought rice by the bag. A single cup sufficed. Most importantly, I paddled our canoe as Papa fished. Above all else, Papa loved to fish. His eyes were damaged by sun and glare from a lifetime of seafaring. "I depend on you," he'd say. "You are my guide." If Papa caught more fish than we needed, we might sell a few, 5 cents for large and 3 for smaller. Mostly, however, we gave them away. Sharing food was a common and important practice on the island. Grandfather and I built a woodshed and a thatch cooking house. We half buried an oil drum to serve as an earth oven. And on the occasions when flour was available, Grandmother baked bread. My grandparents consumed a traditional islander's diet, consisting of taro or breadfruit, fish or seafood, coconut, banana, and papaya. When store-bought foods came onto the island, especially spam, rice, mackerel, and sardine, we kids were excited to sample. Not my grandparents, though. For them, nothing, and I mean nothing, compared with grilled fish and baked breadfruit. If I complained that my homework was too difficult, Mama would say, "If I put this plate of fish and taro in front of you, I'll bet you can do that homework." And of course she was right. Weather permitting, we ate out of doors on platters woven from bandana sleeves. We shared meals with visitors. My grandparents always welcomed the taro farmers returning from their fields. The men sat about enjoying cigarettes and coffee. Until I departed the island for high school, my cousins and I only occasionally wore shoes or slippers. Our shorts were itchy, made from flour sacks. Our t-shirts, faded hand-me-downs. We knew nothing about Adidas or Nike, which we couldn't have afforded even if we had. Papa insisted on cutting my hair, even up to the time when he was nearly blind. "You look handsome," he'd say, but I knew different. Later, without telling, I'd find an aunt or uncle to repair the damage. I didn't have the heart to disappoint my grandfather with the truth. Were we happy? As happy as children could be. Did we know what our futures might hold? We had not a clue. We all had a sense that our lives were about to unalterably change, but beyond that we had no inkling. As the stars twinkled by the millions, my cousins and I would recline in the sand to count meteors. "There's an American satellite," one of us might announce. That's a Russian satellite, another might say. We had no idea what we were talking about, nor any real notion of what a satellite might be. It sounded exciting, however, a hint that something grand and mysterious was waiting for us just beyond the horizon. Talking points. How would you describe JoJo's relationship with his grandparents? Do you have a similar relationship with people in your life? What did JoJo's chores include? What chores do you have? Vocabulary. Dryland taro. Adze. Frigate bird. Thatch. Pandanus. Parrotfish. Grouper. Snapper. Trevally.